Okay, let's start. So going back to the question, and some of you answered B, C, okay, meron ding D. So in the application of the ridge counting is only applied to, yan, may mga sumagot na. Yes, it is for letter B. Kapag sa whorl, it is ridge tracing. Though you will do ridge counting for whorl in some instance. But ridge counting is only intended for loop. Okay? Another question. It is the numerical description of a set of classified fingerprint which is composed of figures and letters and written on a horizontal way like a fraction is what? Okay. Kumikinang o yung sagot? Okay, may mga nagsagot na ng letter B. How about the rest? Diba, pag sinabi nating fraction, there is numerator and denominator. So, the correct answer for this question is the classification formula. We will talk later more about classification formula. Now, it is the process of writing below each fingerprint pattern the corresponding symbol of its name. A. Classification. B. Blocking. C. Simplification. And D. Abbreviation. Ano nang sagot? May nagsagot ng A. May nagsagot ng B. Ano yung dapat nyong gawin muna? You need to fix first the table before you may proceed doing the primary classification, secondary classification. So, di ba, gagawa, merong box dyan. Okay. So, how many columns? There are 5. Okay. So, you need to put the figure 16, 8, 8 divided by 4, 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, then add 1. Okay. So you need to identify if that is a right hand and that is the symbol, so therefore it is radial. And then if this is a left hand, if that is a symbol, again, that is also a radial. So this what we are doing is placing the symbols, the figures. So the first thing that you must do is you will do blocking. Okay? Ang tawag natin is to block the table. Next. Are there how many division of fingerprint classification used in the Henry system? Okay, someone answered B, and some of you also answered letter D. Now, what we know is we have the primary classification, secondary classification, sub uh, secondary classification, key classification, major classification, and final classification. So the number of division of fingerprint classification used in the Henry system, yes, there are 4 types of classification. Yung noon it was originally started from the main 4 classification, which are primary, secondary, subsecondary, and final. However, it was later added with key and major upon the initiative of the FBI classification. If it is only Henry system, there are 4. But since it is already added by the 2 classification added by the FBI, which are the major and key, that makes it to 6. Okay? So, ang pagpipilian nyo talaga is letter B and letter D. Pero dito kasi sa sagot is it's letter D. Though it was originally, there are 4 classification. Pero ang tinerterm na kasi ngayon, although it is Henry FBI, it is still accepted as Henry system, since the classifications are all started with Henry system. But there are actually 7 classification. Isn't it? Well, we will reiterate again the classification. First, we have the primary classification, followed by secondary classification, followed by subsecondary classification, followed by the key classification. Next is the major classification, and final classification to make it 6 classifications. Ano yung naidagdag na classification? In some other source, they only stated 6. Pero the existing now, sabi ko nga sa inyo, there are some books that are still obsolete. Now we are updating, and now board exam is also being updated. Pakitap nyo yung pang 7. Ano yung pang 7 na classification? Anyone? Meron ba sa inyo nakakalam kung ano yung pang 7 classification? Ang pangpitong classification ay second sub-secondary classification. Second sub-secondary classification. I-discuss natin maya-maya. Di ba mayroon sub-secondary? Meron din second sub-secondary classification. Okay. Now, we have here this question. It is the type of pattern in which the course is traced, the line flow above the right delta, and there are 3 intervening ridge. It is the type of pattern in which the course is traced, the line flow above the right delta, and there are 3 intervening ridge. Type your answer. Lolo. Remember, there are 3 intervening ridge, which is above the right delta. If this is the delta, okay, so above the right delta, what is that? Sorry, it's the above right delta. Yan. If it is above the right delta, it is inner whorl. Pero kapag below the right delta, it is outer. Okay? If there are only 1 or 2 ridges, both above and below the delta or in front of the delta, the answer is meeting. Okay? If the ridge touched by the trace, as you draw an imaginary line, okay, it touches 3 below the delta, it is outer. But if it is above, it is inner. If all sides, both above the right delta or below the right delta, and 2 ridges in front of the delta, it is meeting whorl. So this is what I'm telling you a while back. This classification system was originally consisting of 4 parts. It was started from the primary, secondary, sub-secondary, and final. But it was later added with key and major upon the initiative of the FBI, which this classification is already termed as Henry FBI classification. Additionally, it may become 7 division upon the addition of the second sub-secondary classification. Second sub-secondary classification is placed on top of the sub-secondary. So dito siya may lalagay. So what is the purpose? Why do we place the second sub-secondary classification on top of this sub-secondary? Okay, maya-maya. But for now, let us first answer this. What division in the classification formula is derived from both little finger and is placed at the extreme right of the classification formula. Oh, how about the rest? How about the others? Yes. Since we are referring to the both little finger and they are both placed at the right. Diba doon sa blocking natin? Okay? Now, ito yung right thumb, ito yung little left finger. Ito naman yung right little finger. So these both are under the final classification kasi the final classification is for the first loop. Ayan. Yung key sorry yung key is for first loop. Final is for both little fingers. Okay? Ayan. So, para hindi tayo malito, let us discuss. Ito muna ay overview of the fingerprint classification. For example, this is the classification. Okay? So, this is the classification line. Okay? So, this is the numerator and this is the denominator. Okay? The first to be solved is, okay, sige nga, ano yung una nating dapat sagutin? What classification? Type nyo nga yung sagot nyo. Yes, it is the primary classification. So what is next to primary classification? Ano yung sasagutin nating after primary? Type your answer. Yes, it is the secondary classification. After this secondary classification, it is followed by sub-secondary classification, then followed by the final classification. Yun yung sinasabi nating both little fingers. And then after the final classification, ano ang sunod? Yes, the next is major classification and the last one is the key classification. Kapag inyong mapapansin, babasahin, you will start reading from the key classification. However, the classification that must be resolved first is the primary classification. So the question sometimes it is constructed this way. What classification is first seen in the classification formula? The answer is the key classification. But the classification to be resolved first is the primary classification. Now, let us talk about the classification. Yung sinabi natin classification, we are referring to the classifying the fingerprint. Classification formula wherein there is a numerator and denominator. Okay? Then classification line, a line that serves or to point out where is the numerator and denominator. So here is the classification formula. Let us talk first the group patterns. Division for purpose of classification and filing. All the types of patterns are divided into two groups. There are classifications that are written numeric, and there are also some groups that are written written in letters that are non-numeric. So when we say numeric or numerical, the numerical groups is composed of prints containing whorl patterns. This only happen or these are only seen in the classification where there is a numeric. While non-numerical, this composed of set of prints in which no whorls are present. When there are no whorls. Okay, let us go back to what is shown a while back. So looking at on the classification, there are classifications that are numeric and there are classifications that are non-numeric, non-numerical. So in numbering of the fingers, you will always start from the right thumb and you will end at the left little finger. Again, you will start from the right thumb and end from the little finger, left little finger. So, what is the appearance? This is appearance. What is the appearance of formula? It is algebraic fraction. So here is an example. So this is the classification line. So let us start now on how we compute or solve primary classification. Okay, magsulat kayo, take the notes kayo. First, grouping the patterns as interpreted. Yan yung tinutukoy nating blocking. Okay? First group, this composed of patterns with non-numerical value. Plain indented arches and radial and ulnar loop. That is non-numerical. But second group, this composed of patterns with numerical value. The plain whorl, central pocket loop whorl, double loop whorl, and accidental whorl. Ngayon, ang ating kukuhanin dito ay yung mga whorls lamang. Pero ating tignan muna kung saan ba dito yung even and odd numbers. Okay? The denominator is the total numerical value. Okay? Di ba? Meron tayong numeric denominator. Numerator and denominator. The denominator is the total numerical value of the whorls appearing in any of the odd fingers. We are referring to 1, 3, 5, yan, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Plus always add the arbitrary count of 1. Bakit may arbitrary count of 1? Because there is no primary classifications as 0 over 0. This is wrong. There is no primary classification appearing 0 out of 0. Kaya meron siyang arbitrary of 1. In cases na walang whorls, at least meron pa ring numerical na mayroong number na may lalagay doon, which is 1 over 1. Okay? So, meron tayong question. The following are the steps in deriving primary classification. Okay, if you still remember. Na. Hindi. Ayan. By pairing, 'di ba ang ito kasama yan by pairing. Next is by assigning number values. Next is by summing up. Then by adding the pre-established. So, except letter E. Okay. Gawin natin na. Tandaan nyo to. Kopyahin nyo to. By pairing, by assigning number values, by summing up the numbers, by adding the pre-established, and none of this is the answer. So, yung A, B, C, and D are requisites for computing or resolving the primary classification. So, here is an example. First, sabi niya by pairing. Okay, let us pair. The first pair is the right thumb and index finger. Right thumb and right index finger. So here is the placing the value. Okay, so first pair, the value of the first pair is 16. Then the second pair are the middle finger, right middle finger, and right ring finger. And the value is 8. Next pair is the right little finger and left thumb. So the value is 4. Next pair is the left index finger and the left middle finger. And the value is 2. Okay? Then, next pair is the left ring finger and left little finger. Okay? Ayon. So the value is 1. Okay. Let me just make a blank here. Sample. Yan. Remember, ang primary classification natin ay kinukuha na lang natin yung mga whorls. 'Di ba? Whorls lang. So, we know already the when we say, let's say for example, whorl. Okay. You know the value, 'di ba? Ang value nito is 16. The value of this is 8. Then the value of this is 4. The value of this is 2. And the value of this is 1. Then plus arbitrary of 1. So what are you going to compute? Only those whorl. Kasi kapag lahat yan ay whorl, ang lalabas na computation is 32 out of 32. If all are not whorls, then the classification would be 1 out of 1. Okay. Anyone who would like? Okay, I will just give you few seconds to compute. Okay? Just get first the denominator ha. Denominator muna tayo. Bakit? Saan ba yung 1, 3, 5, 7? It is the denominator. 1 is the right term. So denominator muna bago yung numerator. Okay. 30 seconds to compute. Or lagay nyo lang kung 5/4, ganun na lang pag-type nyo. Or 3/5. Ayan. Okay, may naglagay dito 21/3, 17/6. Remember, ang kasama ng denominator is 1, 3. Ayan ang pagpaplasin nyo. 5, 7, 9. Ang pagpagplasin nyo naman sa numerator is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yan yung magkakasama. Okay. Sagutin na natin ha. It is not a whorl. Okay? Ito whorl. This is not add number. So add number mo na. 'Di ba? No whorl, so 0. No whorl, so 0. Whorl. Okay? What is the value of this whorl? It is 4. Okay? Then 7, number 7. Okay, lagyan natin dito para hindi kayo malito. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? So, balik tayo. 1 has no whorl, 3 has no whorl, so 0 pa lang yon. Pero sa number 5, there is a whorl. So the value is 4. So number 7 has no whorl. Number 9 has a whorl. So what is the value of number 9? It is 1. So 4 plus 1 equals 5. Then we have the arbitrary 1. So 5 plus 1 is 6. So this is your denominator. Okay, sa even numbers naman tayo. Pagdating mo sa number 2, merong whorl. So what is the value? 16. Pagpunta mo sa 4, walang whorl. Pagpunta mo sa 6, whorl. So ano pa rin ang bilang natin? 16. Pagdating mo sa number 8, walang whorl. Pagpunta mo sa number 10, wala pa rin. So you still have 16. So 16 plus the arbitrary of 1, it is 17. So your primary classification is 17/6. For the benefit of others, let me again make a new one. Okay? Make a new one. So dapat yung drawing nyo mayroon ng value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is 8. And this is 10. So this is radial, ulnar, whorl, tented, radial, central pocket loop whorl, accidental, radial, ulnar, and palitan natin to. Gawin nating ulnar. And this is, yan. Okay? I'll give you a few seconds to compute. Okay na, may nagsagot na dito. Okay, may nagsagot ng 6/9. Siguraduhin nyo, walang kopyahan ah. Nag-aantay kayo. Okay. Sagutin natin. Magsimula tayo muna sa denominator. Okay. Number 1 is not a whorl. Number 3 is a whorl. So what is the value of this group? It is 8. And then pagdating mo sa 5, it is not a whorl. So remain 8 pa rin yung value. Pagdating mo sa 7, it is not a whorl. Pagdating mo sa 9, it is not a whorl. So you still have 8. So you must add 1, the arbitrary. So your denominator must be 9. Okay? Next. The numerator. Number 2 is not a whorl. Number 4 is standard. So it is not a whorl. Number 6 is a whorl, central pocket loop whorl. So what is the value? 4, 'di ba? Then pagdating mo sa 8 is not a whorl. Then pagdating mo sa 10, there is a whorl. So 4, what is the value of number 10? 1. So 4 plus 1 is 5. Then add the arbitrary of 1. So what is the primary classification? It is 6/9. Nakita ko majority of you got the correct answer. Oh, very good. Okay, let us now proceed.
Sir, singit ko lang po. Si Ral po, medyo nahihirapan din po mag-connect. Nagre-reconnect po. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sige. Next, if the right thumb and right index fingers and left thumb, left index, left ring, and left little fingers are whorls, what is the primary classification? Hey, you solve it. Okay, bilis-bilisan natin mag-sagot. Okay, may nagsagot. 22/20. Okay, may nagsagot ng A. Dapat kinompute nyo yan ha. Okay. So gagawa ulit tayo ng box dito. Okay. Ang sabi niya kasi right thumb, so right index fingers and left thumb, left index, left ring, and little fingers are whorls. So lagyan natin right thumb, right index, and then left thumb, left index, then left ring are whorls. Again, ulitin natin. Right thumb, check. Right index, check. And left thumb, check. Left index, check. Left little fingers, check. Are whorls. Okay? So, denominator. So, this is whorl number 1. So, 16. So, 1, 3, 5. Sa 3, 5 walang whorl. Pero pagdating mo sa 7, meron. So, 16 plus 2. Okay, that is 18. Then, pagdating mo sa 9, mayroong whorl. So, 19 plus 16 plus 2, 18 plus 1, 19 plus 1 is 20. Doon mo palang malalaman, may sagot ka na. Automatic, yan yung sagot. Diba? Ayan. Hindi mo na kailangang sagutin pa yung numerator kung there is only 120 among the choices. It is the exhibition of the capital letter symbol of ATR, UW, CDX on the indexes of both thumbs. Ano yan? That is both hands. Capital letters. Secondary classification. Now, let us talk about secondary classification. The secondary classification represents the type of pattern appearing on the index fingers of each hand. Remember, it is the index fingers. Now, let us know the symbol of each pattern. Plain arch, it is A. Tented arch is T. Plain arch is W. Double loop whorl is D. Central pocket loop whorl is C. Accidental loop whorl is X. Ulnar loop is U. Radial loop is R. Okay? Remember all these symbols so that you will not be confused. Okay? So there are two groups of secondary classification. We have the capital letters and one is small letters. Again, there are two groups of secondary classification. First group is capital letters and second group is small letters. So there are two that must be resolved in secondary classifications. Dalawa yung kukumputin natin sa secondary classification. Letters into sequence in writing small formula. A small letter in the thumb will proceed the writing if the classification on the index finger. Okay? Small letters in the middle ring and little fingers allow the writing of the classification of the index finger. So alam nyo naman siguro yung ATR. All ATR are only included in the small letters under the secondary classification. So yung capital letters, lahat yan counted. Okay? Pero yung mga small letters, we are only referring to A, T, R. Okay? Plain arch, tented, and radial. Sila lamang yung hahanapin natin sa small letters. Okay? However, if there are no ATR, then sabi dito, the absence of small letter between index finger and another small letter is indicated by a dash. A dash may only applied when the first letter is A and the other is not, but the other is group of small letter which is T, then place a dash. But when the first letter is an ATR but the rest are not ATR, no need to place the dash. Huwag nyo nang ilagay. Wala namang kasunod eh. Not unless kung may kasunod, then maglagay kayo ng dash. Pero kung wala, hayaan na. Okay. If the right thumb and index fingers are plain whorl, the left index is a central pocket loop whorl, what is the secondary classification? Remember, ito yung blocking natin. Okay? So there are 5. So ang kukunin na lang, 'di ba? Ito ay radial, central, whorl. This is whorl. This is radial. This is ulnar. This is tented, radial, ulnar, and whorl. Ang kukunin lang natin automatically yung index finger. So your secondary classification first group is C over T. You all need to know to get is the ATR. Okay? But this question, kasi meron siyang primary classification. What is the correct answer? Okay, actually may sagot na yan, di ba? Ito. Ayan, may kulay na siya. It is letter A. Kasi yung tinutukoy niya, yung right thumb, yung ang kukunin lang natin index fingers are plain whorls. So ano ang kanang symbol ng plain whorls? It is whorl. And the left index is central pocket loop whorl. Then automatic WC is your secondary. Okay. Get the primary and secondary classification. Ito, sorry. This is the computation of the question. Okay, that is 17 over 19 WC. Next, secondary classification by small letters naman na tayo ulit. Refers to the 3 types of fingerprint patterns. We are referring to the ATR. There are 64 combinations. Right index and left index. For the ATR combination, there are 256 combinations. So rule 1, when 2 or 3 of same fingerprint patterns appear, such number as the case may be preceding such patterns is written. Okay? Kung magkatulad lang din naman, then do not write it double A. Okay? Kasi there are instances, 'di ba? Oh, let's say for example, ATR na tayong ATR kasi kinukuha natin yung thumb, index finger, the middle finger and little finger. Again, the small letter covers the thumb, index, middle, and ring finger. Yan yung kukuhanin natin ng ATR. Is that an ATR? Okay? So yung tinutukoy nitong rule na ito, let's say for example, ito, tented and tented. Tapos tented alpha. 'Di ba yung first group ng secondary classification is capital letter T and capital letter A. Ngayon, where is your, let us get the ATR. Is this an ATR? The answer is yes. Then write it on in small letter. Okay, sorry. That is small letter T. Ngayon, mayroon pa palang T dito. Okay? And then dito naman ay radial. Ngayon, kunin mo yung index. Small letter T, then lagyan mo na naman small letter T, tapos pagbabasahin ng 80, wag niyong dugsungan. Rule number 2. When a certain type of fingerprint pattern intervenes and does not belong to the small letters group, the place intended for such finger is represented by a dash to show or indicate which finger belongs. Yan yung sinasabi ko lang na at least saan dito yung walang ATR. Kung ang index finger is an ATR, then A. Pero yung middle finger is not an ATR and the little finger, ring finger is an ATR. So, dapat may dash para malaman kung anong finger yung wala. Pero kapag ang yung mga sumusunod na fingers are not included as ATR, then remove the dash already. Rule number 3. Example of impressions of an arch appears in the right ring finger in a radial loop appears at the left middle finger. Okay. Bigyan ko kayo ng example. If the right thumb, index, and middle fingers are plain arches, and the left index and middle fingers are tended arches, the tests are ulnar loops. What is the secondary classification? Actually, alam nyo na may sagot na rito. Okay? Tandaan nyo yan ha. A, capital letter A, small letter A, then capital letter T, small letter T. Kasi sir, akala ko kapag magkaparehong dalawang T, T exponent. Hindi kasi yung letter T is a capital letter T and the other one is a small letter T. So hindi pwede. So here is what will appear. Okay, yan. Tatat. Atat. So what is your primary classification? Ang primary classification mo is 1/1. Bakit? Walang whorl. So you only have one arbitrary of 1. So 1/1. So what is your secondary classification? Yung capital letter group. Ito O ilagay mo na kagad yung letter A and letter T. Okay. Next. Okay, is this an ATR? Yes, to write the letter T. Okay. Next, ito na kasi itong index fingers are already represented by the capital. So you proceed with the middle finger. So is this an ATR? Yes. Then is the ATR? Yes. Is this an ATR? Yes. Is this an ATR? So denominator na siya sa mababa. Yung numerator and denominator ng odd and even numbers are only for primary classification. But this time, other secondary, other classifications, this is already the numerator and these are already the denominator. Again, these are the numerator and denominator. Okay? That is supposed to, let us correct this one. I made a mistake on my typing. This is not a square. Supposedly, this is the T. It's 2T. Hindi siya A squared but 2T. Then subsecondary classification. Subsecondary classification is the grouping of prints according to ridge count of loops and ridge tracing of whorls. Ridge counting and ridge tracing define. Ridge counting refers to the process of counting the ridge that touch or cross an imaginary line drawn between the core and the delta. A good example is, for example, this is the loop. So once I will now establish the core, this is the delta and this is the core. So when I will create an imaginary line from delta to core, ito yung ilan yung na-touch ng imaginary line. There are 2, so this is 2 ridge count. Okay, yan yung ridge counting for loop. So, ridge tracing, the process of tracing the ridge that emanates from the lower side of the left delta towards the right delta to see where it flows in relation to the right delta. So, let me create a whorl. So, probably this is the remember, if this is a right, okay, if this is a right hand, ang paglalagay mo ng ridge tracing, you will always start from the left delta going to the right delta. Pero kapag this is a left hand, you will start tracing from the right delta going to left delta. Again, if right hand, you will start from the left delta going to your right delta. If it is left hand, you start from the right delta going to the left delta. So, ito yung ridge counting. Whether it touches 2 ridges below the delta or 3 ridges above the delta to determine whether it is inner, meeting, or outer. It is the process of coursing the lower contour. Siguro alam nyo na ang sagot niya yan. Anong sagot dyan? Di ba sinabi ko, ridge lower contour. Okay, yan o. Lower contour. Ayan. Ito yung lower contour. So that is already ridge tracing. Okay. Next, rules in ridge count of loops. Ridge count always from the delta towards the core. Yun yung ginawa ko kanina. Okay? So, assuming this is the delta and then you need to establish a shoulder, you start from the delta going to the shoulder. So, how many ridges are touched by the imaginary line? There are 2. So, this is a 2 ridge count. Number 2, ridge or ridges are counted only when they actually crossed or touch the straight between delta and core. Only touch, ha? Remember, touch, not passed by, but touch. There is a contact. Okay, remember this. Index fingers, middle fingers, ring fingers. Index fingers, 1 to 9 ridge count, that is inner. 10 or more ridge count, that is outer. For the middle fingers, 1 to 10 ridge count is inner. 11 or more ridge count is outer. Ring fingers, 1 to 13 ridge count is inner. And 14 or more ridge count is outer. So para hindi kayo mahirapan mag-memorize, just remember the outer. Okay, kapag index, 10, that is outer. Okay, 11 for middle finger and 14. Kapag 10, 11, 14 and above, they are all outer. So 10, 11, 14, alam mo na. Kasi tatlong fingers lang naman yan. Index, middle, and ring finger. Again, 10, 11, 12. They are all outer. The classification is outer. Now, The symbol of M meeting appearing in a subsecondary classification indicates a whorl in the figures being considered, since only a whorl can have a meeting trace. INO symbol, the symbol INO in the subsecondary classification may relate to a set of prints having loops and whorls, or all loops or all whorls. Okay? So, pag ridge tracing, either inner, okay, uh, meeting or outer. Pero kapag this is only for whorl. Kapag radial naman ang pinag-uusapan natin, either inner or outer. Okay? Ito yung ridge count. Ito naman yung ridge tracing. So how do we do the filing? The filing of the prints within the subsecondary classification is done according to the following sequence. First, ayan, first inner in loops, second outer in loops. And for the whorl, inner, meeting, and outer. So, are there any whorl here? None. There are no whorls. So, probably the primary classification is 1/1. So, ito kasi yung line na ito, this is a right hand. Di ba yung sinabi ko, o yan, yan yung arrow. If you place your right hand on this index finger, what will appear? Radial or ulnar? Okay nga. Type your answer. Is that a radial or ulnar? Yes, it goes to your radius bone, thus it is radial. So what is your numerator for secondary classification? Radial over yan. I will place my left hand, still it is radial. So this is your secondary classification. So next, this is not an ATR in this is not an ATR, that is not ATR. Hindi rin siya ATR, ito. Hindi rin to ATR. Okay? So walang small letter groups for secondary. So let us now proceed for the sub-secondary classification. So what is your sub-secondary classification? Lagay nyo lang kung 000 over or 000 over IMO. Okay? Huwag nyo lang lalagyan ng I love you dyan. Okay? Walang heart dyan sa inyong keyboard. Okay. May nakasagot ng tama. 'Di ba ito ay index? 'Di ba ang pinaka minimum ng outer ng index is O. Yan ay 12. Automatic O. So itong middle finger, 10, 11. No, hindi siya umabot sa quota. So it is I. Ito, sa middle ring finger, umabot ba sa quota? Yes, 14 outer. Okay, next naman sa denominator natin, yung left index, umabot ba sa quota? No, ang quota ay 10 ng outer. So inner pa rin siya. Ang middle finger ba umabot sa quota sa outer na 11? Hindi. So the answer is I. Then the ring finger, umabot pa siya sa quota na 14? The answer is no. So it's still I. Okay? So yan yung tamang sagot. Okay? So perhaps you may also replay ito para hindi tayo magtagal. Ang tamang sagot dyan ay is 5/21 UR IOI OIO. Okay? Then let us still proceed for the subsecondary. So when it is derived from ridge tracing whorls. Okay, paano naman yan? Just give me the secondary classification, subsecondary classification. Yun lang ang ibigay niyong sagot sa akin. Pag hindi nyo pa nakuha ng sagot ng second subsecondary classification, nako. Ano one? Ang nagtatagal Ito yung index M, I, M, I, M, O. Iyan yung second subsecondary classification. Okay? Yan din. So, pag ito ay inner or 3, that is I automatic. Pag naman is down 3, pag down 3, ibig sabihin below the delta, pag sinabi natin below the delta, it is outer. Pero kapag above the delta, dinalagay natin yung ganyan na arrow and 3, that is inner. Pag minsan nakalagay in front, that is meeting only. Okay. Okay, let us now proceed to the second subsecondary classification. Ito yung sinasabi kong bago. Saan ba natin nilalagay ito? May pagkakataon na hindi natin alam. Kasi because of scar, 'di ba? Kapag nagkaroon ng scar, hindi mo alam kung yan ba ay whorl, yan ba ay radial. So hindi mo alam. So the first assumption, sabihin mo, siguro radial to. Siguro whorl ito and radial to. Then gagawa ka na rin ng pangalawang assumption. Siguro whorl, ito yung radial, ito yung whorl. Ang tawag natin dito is second sub-secondary classification. Ibig sabihin, second assumption mo. Siguro, kasi dalawa yung siguro mo. Siguro radial, siguro whorl. Okay, so it is placed. Let's say for example, IMO, siguro ang ganito ay meeting whorl, inner or outer. And again, it is placed above the subsecondary classification. Let us now proceed to the final classification. The exhibition in a numerical figure of the range count of loop in or whorl from the two little fingers. The range count of the right little finger is the numerator and the range count of the left little finger is the denominator. Again, numerator are those right fingers and denominator are those left fingers. But this time, we only focus on the little fingers. Okay? So what are the rules in deriving the range count of the whorl? Kasi automatic loop yung hanapin natin. Paano kapag walang loop sa little fingers? So we will do range count of a whorl. A plain whorl and a central pocket loop whorl are treated as ulnar. But always remember, if that is a right hand, you will start putting an imaginary line from the left delta going to the right delta. If that is a left hand, then you will start from the right delta going to the left delta. Ridge counting of loop patterns should start at the, yan. Ginawa natin yan kanina. Okay? Yes. The correct answer is at the delta going to the core. Let us move on to the major classification. The major classification represents only the thumb of each hand. It is the range count of the loop in or the tracing of the whorl appearing in the thumb of each hand. Okay, if such whorl appears. Okay. By the way, para hindi kayo malito sa kwan, sa final classification. Yung final classification, for example, malalaman mo naman yan at may number na yan kung ilan ang counting. So if this is a 16 count, 16 ridge count, automatic your final classification is 16 over 16. You will just copy the ridge count of the both little fingers and they must be placed right after of the second subsecondary classification. O yan. Okay? So let us move on to the major classification. Ito naman is the major classification represents only the thumb of each finger. It is the range count of the loop in or the tracing of the whorl. Same application will be done like in the final classification. Now, loops patterns in both thumbs. In a set of prints having loop patterns in both thumbs, the range count of the left thumb, you must get first the left thumb so that you may know what formula you will use. Okay, here is an example. Okay, meron tayong dalawang formula. Left thumb ridge count, ridge count. And one is right thumb ridge count. Okay, right thumb ridge count. So, for example, again, itong thumb lang ang kukuhanin natin. Ang nakalagay dito, 17 and 18. Thumb, ha? So, let us get first the left thumb so that we know if are we going to make use of the formula 1, formula 2, formula 3. Okay? So, left thumb is 18. So, hindi siya pasok dito. Hindi rin pasok dito. Dito siya pasok. So, automatic, ang left thumb mo is large. So, ano yung pwede? Ito na ngayon ang gamitin mo na formula para sa right thumb. So, 17, saan siya nakakabilang? Dito, 1 to 17. So, it is small or large. Okay, ulitin natin. Magbigay ako ng example. So, yung right thumb natin ay 11 and 11 naman. yung inyong left thumb. So, sa 17 or more large, hindi siya pwede sa Formula 3. Then, hindi rin siya pwede sa Formula 2, kundi dito lang. So, automatic, ang classification ay small. So, gamitin mo itong formula. 11, 1 to 11 is small. So, the major classification is S over S. Ayan. So, what is the major classification of this example? Sige nga. Oh. Anyone? Okay, someone answered SM. May nagsagot na rin ng ML. Ano ko? Mga ML ito May nagsagot na rin ng LM. Binigtad. Oh, bakit may medium extra large? MXL. Okay, ML. Okay. So, kunin muna natin yung denominator. 16. Saan ba siya nabibilang na formula? It is located in the formula 2. So, it is medium. Diba? 16 is located sa second formula. So, gamitin natin yung formula 2. So, 17 sa nakakabilang sa sa large. So, ang major classification mo ay 11M. Okay, 11M. Ganun lang kung paano siya kumuha ng major classification. Let us now proceed dito. Tuloy mo namin ito. Note, if either terms belongs to small letter groups, there will be no major division. Okay lang. Kahit na walang major classification. Okay, na-discuss naman natin yung ridge count and ridge tracing. Let us now proceed to the key classification. The key classification represents the ridge count of the right first loop appearing in a set of prints beginning of the thumb of the right thumb, but excluding the little fingers because little fingers are only for final classification. So do ridge counting on the first loop that appears in the fingerprint card. Start searching from the right thumb. Of course, yun yung pinakauna. If there is loop that appear in the sets of pattern, do ridge counting on the first loop. That appear on the set of prints, apply the same rule in final classification on how to do ridge counting on a whorl. Okay, so only the key classification has no denominator. Even even the first loop is located at the first even the loop is located at the left little finger 10, it is always placed on top of the classification line in the numerator. Again, this is only classification has no denominator. Minator. Okay? So it is the ridge count of the first loop pattern appearing on the fingerprint card except the two little fingers. Ano yon? It is sagot agad. Yes, it is key classification. By the way, let me just discuss yung we're on the subsecondary classification. Kapag amputated, tapos ito ay whorl, automatic, this is treated as whorl. And the classification is meeting. So you will just copy the other finger. Pero kapag this is radial, make this as ulnar. Kapag ito yung amputated, ito ang amputated, this is ulnar. So you will copy, the ridge count is 15. Copy, paste yung ridge counting, pero the ulnar becomes radial kasi pag babaliktarin mo, magre-radial talaga siya. Okay? Ayan. I think let me just in for this while. If there are any questions or clarifications na lang, you may just anytime you can message me. If you want to discuss more about this classification, pwede kong isingit sa sunod na subject.